Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we step into a fantasy world full of dangers untold where a comet's fiery return ignites a new era of mystery and adventure. Now you'll be choosing your hero, engaging in asymmetric battles, while enjoying the enchanting landscapes and captivating lore. Vrahode, Age of Prophecy, is an adventure across the overlands, oceans, and underlands of this seductive yet perilous world. It's for 1 to 4 players. Each adventure lasting about 60 to 90 minutes is for ages 12 and up and published by Weather Vane Games. Now it's being crowdfunded right now, so I'm going to show you how the game works and I'll see you on the other side. Now this is a crowdfunding preview, so all the art and components you see here, they're not final, they're prototypes. To see the most up-to-date art and components, check the link in the description of this video. Now you're going to select a hero. Now each of these heroes are going to have certain things about them, like the amount of life that they start with, and you're also going to see different skills like body and spirit, mind, focus, and such, how far they can move. They'll also have some starting gear and some skills. And they're each going to have some racial traits and abilities, sometimes some restrictions, but they're very asymmetric. Now each of these heroes is represented by one of these cool miniatures, so enjoy checking these out. Now each player is going to have a hero dashboard, and your card is going to go there, and it's going to be tracking many of the things that you have on your card here, like body, spirit, mind. We'll talk more about these later. You'll also be tracking your life, your movement, mitigation, and skills. Also, in the final product, there's going to be a cover that goes on this so it's easily saving where you're at. Now each hero is going to start with some equipment, so our hero starts with a short sword, a simple studded armor, and a wooden shield, and each of those sort of tell you what they do, how much mitigation and things they do, how much damage they do, and this and that. Each hero is also going to start with some skills. This specific hero starts with 3 body skills. So each of these are unique skills that you'll be able to use. They have different costs and different abilities and things like that. And you can also keep them right on your dashboard like this. Now there's many encounters that are included in the box. We're looking at number 1 here. This takes place in the plains. This is Bend in the Trail. Now these have multiple scenarios, like A and B in this case, and it has a conclusion down here. It also tells you how many enemies there are depending on the players, and there'll be some rewards down at the bottom. Now each of these scenarios will show you where the heroes and the enemies start. It'll also tell you objective to kill all the enemies and reach the glinting object. So for example, it told us to start the enemies right here in this specific scenario, and the glinting object is here, and the heroes start here and then adjacent as well. Now once the battle's set up, you're going to draw some initiative tokens from this bag. There's going to be 1 for each of the heroes and 1 for each of the enemies. So each player and enemy is going to get one of these. And this is sort of turn order, if you will, with the lowest one going first and going in that order over multiple turns in this specific encounter. Now, there may be reasons why you want to go last or first or somewhere in the middle, and you can actually swap your initiative for a different unused one by gaining some fatigue. Now, you start with a fatigue, and as you get by certain thresholds, it's going to hinder you to do certain things. We'll go talk a little bit more about that later. You can also switch with another hero, but you both need to go up 2 fatigue. And when it's your turn, you get to use turn points. Now everyone gets 2 turn points, and most of the things you can do cost 1 turn point. You might be moving, you might be attacking, you might be using skills or racial abilities, but you're only doing 1 physical attack, skill, or racial ability in any given turn, but you might be moving and attacking and moving and using skills and doing things like that. Now, as you move, you'll have a movement based on your hero. You may get some equipment that might change this. Now, your first or last move can be diagonal. After that, it's got to be orthogonal. Or if you spend it last, you go orthogonally, then you can end your movement going diagonal. So here we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe you could have moved 6. You can move through heroes, but you don't end your spaces, end your turn on any of those. Now you'll notice that some of these have sort of solid lines, and you can't go through those by default. Other maps and other encounters have many other things like water and darkness and things you have to deal with, but in this basic map, there's none of that. Now, one of the things you could do is attack using one of your turn points. Now, this specific hero is doing a melee attack, meaning they have to be adjacent to the enemy. Some heroes need to be certain distance to use range. Now, since we're doing a melee, we're going to roll the d20. And if you're doing melee, you're going to look at your body stat. If you're doing a ranged attack, you'd look at your focus stat. Now, for the body stat, we're at 12. We have to roll a 12 or less in order to get this. And we did. We rolled a 10. So it's a successful hit. Then we would roll a modifier die. And this modifier die ranges from -1 to +3. So it has -1, 2, 3, +1, 2, 3. Let's say we rolled a +1. Now we'll look at our item here, our short sword. It says it does 5 base melee damage. And with our modifier, we're at 6. Then we'd look at the enemy's mitigation. So this is the enemy that we were fighting, that right there. And we look at mitigation is 2. So we were at 6. So minus the 2 mitigation, 4. So we did 4 damage. This tracks its life. This is a token that you can actually place under the standee so you know which one is which, because sometimes you'll have multiple enemies out there. And so this went from life of 14 to a life of 10, for example. Now, if we had done a critical roll of 1, we'd still add the additional, but we would not use the mitigation, so it actually all go towards the enemy. Now, you can only do 1 attack or skill or racial ability per turn, but instead of doing the standard attack like we just showed you, maybe you want to use one of your skills. Now, for example, the Blade of the Warlord, this would add bleed effect to the hero's cutting weapon this battle. Now, these have different costs here, right here. And that is essentially currency in the game, and you have a nice place here to move it from available to spent. So this one actually has an additional ability where you can spend another one, but requires body of 14, which we don't yet have, but it would increase it to a 2x bleed effect. Because right now we're at a body of 12, we couldn't even use that part of it. So if we did that, this bleed effect goes on that enemy, and what the bleed does is it basically gives 1 damage per turn to the target. Or maybe we did a feral charge, where we charge an enemy up to twice our movement. Our movement's 6, which means we can move up to twice, doing 5 base damage, plus 1 for each body point over 12, and causing knockdown. If they're knocked down, they basically get a -1 mitigation, and they'll need to spend a whole turn point to stand up before using another action. Or you might use Frenzied Blood, which is good when you're sort of down on life because it has 2 times your physical attacks if the life is below 50% of the max battle line. And again, there are some racial abilities they might be able to use. Now, these ones can't be used on this encounter because there's no water here. But this one, like for example, they have Aquatic Mastery, +1 mitigation in overland or ocean battles where water's present. Or they could use a Watery Noose, which causes 2 damage and -2 to a target movement this round, so in a range of 8. So you could use some of these as well, but again, only 1 racial ability, skill, or basic attack per turn. However, let's say this enemy was still right next to me and they wanted to attack me. It was their turns in the initiative order. It shows you how much they could move. It shows you, what they have to roll. It shows, they can't do range, so they have to be right next to you. They could do 5 damage. It shows you how many times per battle it could actually use its special sort of ability there. So let's say the enemy was getting ready they wanted to use this. So what they would do is they would have to roll this D6 first to see if they're able to use this ability. Now what they have to do is roll a -1 or higher. So basically a -1, a 1, a 2, or a 3. If they do, then they'll roll the success if it needs to. Like this says, success roll required. So in this case, they do have to roll this if they roll what they need here. They need a 14 or less. They rolled a 13, so they're going to do 5 base damage plus poison to the effect onto that character. And so that poison basically causes 1 damage per turn to that target. Now that was the enemy attacking. But the enemy itself, you're going to essentially move them. There's no game master here, so everyone gets to play. And what's going to happen is enemies are going to move to within their own unique attacking range to the nearest player. But, the enemy is going to be very aggressive. So they're going to go to the closest hero to them that last successfully melee attacked them. Or the closest hero to them who unsuccessfully attempted to melee attack them, and so on and so forth, all the way down. So whoever's the most aggressive towards them is the one they're going to try to move to and attack. Now, some enemies can actually inflict afflictions on you. In this case, this one does Corpus Fragilis. And what that does is it causes -3 on body rolls, but it can be cured as well. So there's these little dice that slot in it, and knows that I have -3 on my body rolls. Now that you know a little bit about rolling and what you roll for, different effects are going to have you be more fatigued, like changing initiative, moving to a new map, and different effects as such. Once you get to 6, you have a -1 on all your rolls. If you get 9 or 10, it's -2. Now those are the very basics of how turns work and the different things that you're going to be doing. Now at the end of the different encounters, you're going to get rewards like drawing an item from the basic items deck. And you might find things like a fine mace that does 6 base melee damage, or a fine short bow that can cause 4 base piercing damage from a range of 7, or maybe some bandages that allows you to heal 2 damage and eliminate all bleed effects. Now, once the battle is concluded, you can essentially rest, and you can recover fatigue, currency, and heal, but you don't have to. Now, players can trade items with each other, but then you'll be drawing from this rest deck. So in this case, we did get some restful sleep, and all the heroes who rested received +2 currency, -2 fatigue, and -2 damage. However, you might get ambushed, so you might want somebody to go out there and watch for you. And depending on how fatigued the person is who's watching for you, certain things will happen. For example, if their fatigue is 6 to 8, they get a -3 or -2. The player falls asleep if they roll that. And that's important because if an ambush does come up, if like they had the 6 to 8 and they rolled a -3 or -2, they fell asleep and they were not watching, so the ambush happens. Otherwise, they could have stopped the ambush. I mean, it doesn't really stop it, it more like hinders it because they get to place the enemy anywhere as opposed to right next to where you are. And they get to attack as well. So that's just one of the many ways that fatigue affects things. Now, just all that, sometimes you'll be coming across some treasured items like the Battle Ulu, which does 6 base melee. Sometimes you'll find a Fine Chain Mail, which gives you +4 mitigation, or a Potion of Focus, which essentially it increases your rolls for focus by 2. Now, you might also come across regional items, like this first one with the mushrooms. Not only does it heal 4 damage, it also cures the affliction we talked about earlier. Or the purple mandrake, it cures a specific affliction, and same with the stag horn as well. It gets rid of the Harmward fever affliction. And in other encounters, you might find terrain that have dotted lines, and those are hard terrain to get past, and so they cost 2 movement points to enter them. But when there's just like one space, you can actually leap over them as well. Now, earlier we saw certain enemies that are good about going through water and such. So as you can imagine, there's going to be scenarios and encounters where you will be going through water. Now, you'll also find some encounters that are in the Underlands, and they're inherently dark. So without a torch or some other light source, you have a difficult time seeing. Even though you see a fire here, this doesn't actually help you. This is just so you can see actually where to go. But pretty much all heroes suffer a darkness penalty of -1 to all stat rolls. But you can get rid of that with lit torches, lanterns, and other items. Now, some characters actually have flying. Some of them will have short flying. These two have perma-flying, which is flying for a longer period of time, where they're able to fly over certain terrains, and they won't have the penalties, like flying over ocean doesn't hurt these like they would with other people. Now, they can actually fly at flight height, meaning they can only be struck by ranged attacks, but they also can fly at a lower level called fight height, which allows them to be at melee combat or on ground where they can, remove projectiles that are stuck in them, for example. So those are the very basics of Vrahode, Age of Prophecy, and hopefully this gives you a better idea of how the game works in a nutshell and what it's about. Well, there you have Vrahode, Age of Prophecy, and as I showed in the overview, there's many different encounters to experience, and it's streamlined for action using the hero dashboards and designed for easy learning and teaching that captivates both novice and seasoned players alike. Now, if you'd like to see the most up-to-date art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me right in the description of this video. Now, that's going to take you directly to the crowdfunding project page, and I'm sure that Weathervane Games would love your support.